Good evening and welcome to LegalTech Live episode 75. Thank you to my guest, Henning Diedrich. I'm screwing it up.
Take it.
Say it for me because you say it
Diedrich.
so smooth. Oof, God, I can't do that. And Professor Carla Reyes. Thank you so much for being here. They are in charge of, and I believe you were the original founder, Henning, of Lexon. Lexon is a new type of program language that anyone can read. And in its natural language programming, specifically, what I've learned is valid legal contracts on the blockchain, or smart contracts as we've come to know them, but it's a little bit more complex than that, and it's the programming language behind that. Is that a decent summary for us to begin with?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, I think it really is this focus on human readable in the sense of every human who can read, and not just programmers who can program. And that is really what it's all about. And a lot of the stuff that emanates from that just are the implications, basically, of what happens all of a sudden if you, as we say, collapse these two worlds, right? The legal world and the programming world, which are, quite some worlds apart.
Mm-hmm. But the rules are not dissimilar, right? We are still dealing with rules in the legal world and rules in the programming world.
Yeah, one of the most fascinating things I found researching the book about Lexon, that actually it was a professor of law who is deemed this is the book.
A book.
The book.
Show the book. There it is.
You find it on Amazon. But one of the most astounding things I found is that it was actually a professor of law who is regarded as the father of computer sciences. That was Leibniz. And the first thing, when he was in one of his theses, basically, and the first thing that he came up with as an example of what he would love to program was actually a piece of law. It was old Roman law, like at his time, 1300 years old. And he was basically proposing as the first example ever of what he would like programmed in 1666, a piece of law where it was about the different ways that a contract could benefit somebody, like you and me, or just you, or just me, or a third party and me, and so on. And he was about like, yeah, couldn't we just find a way? And they were at that time building mechanical calculators. Pascal had started building those machines that we know now, these brass machines that could add and subtract. And it was in the air at that time, I guess, to think ahead and think about what else could we calculate. And fascinatingly, the first example that is documented was actually law. So I think that, coming back to your question, is very much proof that there is this incredible parallelity, or even, you could even say, programming kind of started with somebody having a question about automation of law.
Standing. So give us a little bit of a background on you, Henning, and how you came to create Lexon, and then Carla, I'd like you to chime in as to how you got involved. But Henning, a little background on you, because I will say it's quite light on the internet. The bios were I couldn't find a solid bio, and I say that I say that to say that I've finally got a guest that I can call an international man of mystery, and I love it. So I'm really excited about that. But tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into this.
Yeah, I know I shouldn't say that, right? But when Henning asked me to stand in for him, I was like, dude, I mean, this is the easiest job ever because you have almost nothing out there about you, right? The truth is that having nothing on LinkedIn basically signals you don't need a job, right? And having nothing out there in terms of CV is basically trying to be a cypherpunk, which I'm maybe not. Maybe I am, and also that is like not on me to say publicly, right?
Right.
So that's all by design. My background actually is programming, as you might have guessed, and Lexon probably happened because I really like programming languages, and It turned out that when I was working in mobile payment, somebody who never stopped talking about Bitcoin. And at some point I relented, and I was immediately fascinated because actually also Bitcoin is based on a very primitive kind of language and a virtual machine. And that actually got me hooked about blockchains because it was very exciting use case about it. Now, there are a lot of languages in the blockchain space. Solidity is the most well-known one, but it's by far not the only one. And I think there are also beautiful new languages coming up in the Cardano blockchain, for example, or Eternity blockchain. But they're all made for programmers. They are they're beautiful because of their elegance and their expressiveness and so on. But since a couple of years, there was this idea that wouldn't it be awesome if we could have a natural language-like language to program smart contracts with? And my initial motivation really was, if you could add a layer that is acceptable to a judge to this magic layer that blockchains bring, that basically allows you to shift possession, then by this human readability, you might also shift ownership in sync with that. And that actually makes smart contracts safer, if you think about it, because it makes them safe against being taken to court, as you will always be able to. But it really decreases the incentive for frivolous lawsuits that might bring down a large-scale IoT scheme of smart contract-driven devices, what have you.
And Carla, who, a little background on Carla Reyes joined the Michigan State University College of Law as an assistant professor of law and director of the Center for Law, Technology, and Innovation in 2018. She teaches business enterprises, technology transactions, artificial intelligence in the law, and blockchain law and policy. Carla, how did you and Henning meet, and how did you get involved in Lexon?
So I met Henning through a group called the Coalition of Automated Legal Applications at a variety of conferences workshops that they hold. And in 2017, I was working on this paper called Conceptualizing Crypto Law. And I asked Henning to give me comments on the paper, and he said, sure, if you give me comments on this paper about this thing called Lexon. And so that's how I first heard about Lexon, gave comments on it, and thought it was the coolest thing ever. Although the early paper was very harsh on lawyers like me. And I remember very strongly, it's a story I tell my students now about how business lawyers need to be more helpful, or we'll have clients who, like Henning, feel that we aren't helpful and we just want to kill the business. So it's a very impressionable moment for me, just reading this paper. Not just about Lexon, but for other reasons too. And then I sort of helped a little bit here and there with some things until I think more recently, it became possible using Lexon to actually build the thing that I talked about in Conceptualizing Crypto Law. In that paper, I said, I think you could build this thing using smart contracts. And only thing is I couldn't actually build it because I don't code in Solidity. And so then along comes a functioning version of Lexon, and I'm working to build it in Lexon because I can do that, which is super cool.
That is cool. That is cool. So I can see them just so desperately wanting to say something. Let's go to Adam. Adam, I know this is right in your wheelhouse. Jump in. Questions for Lexon.
Sure. Yeah. I first of all, I think it's fantastic what you guys are doing, and thank you for being part of this. I had kind of talked with Nick ahead of time about trying to maybe come at this from the angle of people that maybe not even super familiar with what a smart contract is. And I'm going to come at it a little bit from the angle of somebody who is a business lawyer some of the time and gets yelled at for making things, for being a deal killer, and is also a product manager. I also have a foot in that space too. So I'm kind of looking at it from both angles. When I think about, so I want to ask about contracts, and I want to ask about your vision for how this makes the process of working with contracts work better. And if I can sort of back up and just kind of say a little bit more about that question, I looked it up, and the worldwide GDP is $80 trillion. or thereabouts. And a lot of that is due to contracts. And yet everybody kind of hates contracts. It's sort of a love-hate relationship. And I'm just talking about signing a lease, okay? Or a merger agreement or what have you. You're kind of either in the position of, I don't have a lawyer, I can't afford a lawyer, they put this thing in front of me and I said, oh, I don't know what the hell to do, so I signed it. Or you're a business person, as Carla was saying, and you're like, JFC, can we just get this deal done? Why are the lawyers fighting about the indemnity provision? And so it's like the last industry to embrace information technology. I'm waiting for the MIT guys to jump in and start trying to do something about this. Anyway, let me.
Yeah, where's the question? You're lawyering this to death.
Yeah, I guess. Well, see, I'm trying to show, not tell, how lawyers are such a pain in the ass. Here's the question for Carla and Henning. Like, what? So if I run a T-shirt business, or I'm a songwriter that wants to license my songs to a video game, what does the world look like 10 years from now, when Lexon is really like the thing that makes contracts work?
Henning, Carla, which would either or both?
Carla, do you want to jump in, or otherwise I start and you give me the lawyer cover?
You can start, and then I'll give the lawyer
Right.
version.
So Adam, thanks a lot. I mean, I appreciate a lot that you are asking about 10 years into the future, because it's a realistic time frame. This will take a long time.
Yep.
People will, first of all, have to learn about that this is a possibility. Then they will have to start get their heads around what they can do with it and how they could change their piece of the pond using this technology, right? And then comes the network effect.
Yep.
And 10 years from now, we might be at the cusp of a situation where, for example, as a musician, you are able to tap into an existing smart contract framework of royalties, which are a great example, because a lot of the royalties are not ending up with artists, not even because, but not even because the music industry is evil, which is a different topic to discuss, but because it's just so difficult to compute, because the way that contracts are made by the big studios and distributors, it's so difficult for them too, right? Because they are focusing on different areas in the world where different rights overlap or have to be excluded and so on. So it becomes a tangled mess as a result of very tangible business interests to get stuff out. And then in the end, it becomes really, really complicated to calculate what an artist should receive in a license fee for a song played, for example, right? Because obviously then even the individual piece of art is then a collage of many different artists collaborating and so on, right? So in this sense, it's really only or mainly a problem of calculating and getting the formulas in place that are reflecting what the agreement was. This is not even about blockchain. This can be helpful doing it completely off-chain. If you do it on-chain, you might even be able to say, okay, now I can really trust that nobody is cheating me with out of my royalties. But even without the blockchain, if everybody trusts mostly their agent and so on, it's a difficult computing task. And the big advance that Lexon can show here is that the moment you write the agreement, and the discipline that it asks of you to write it in Lexon, which is there to write it, you have to learn how to write it. But the moment you craft your agreement, you are also crafting the formula and the program that is actually going to compute what your share of the royalty is going to be for every dollar that comes in at any point in time. And of course, because it's a program, it doesn't cost anything to run. In this case, we're talking off blockchain, right? It's not about gas costs, anything there. So you can just fill in what it is that comes in and out comes through a convoluted, staggered and layered stack of different contracts that are all feeding into each other, how much money should actually go to whom. And this is a degree of automation that you can almost not achieve at this point in time, where you would always have to get a programmer that programs what the contracts say, and then look for an interface between those different contracts, and then a new contract comes in, and there's just no standard, and there's no guarantee that the programmers haven't gotten some black swan case wrong, and then the costs are just not going to be in any proportion to what the dollar coming in royalties is. So this is a great example where this collapsing, so to say, not only of the legal world and the programming world, but also of the business agreement side of it all, is going to be so powerful, and just shaving off the overhead and just shortening the ways between something that can execute and calculate for you, that's completely automated, and the human language in which you have made the agreement in.
From the lawyer perspective, the way we would talk about that same idea, or from the academic perspective, is the idea that the law in action and the law in the books will be much more close together, right? So the deal that you've contracted for, that's represented in the words, is actually going to be closer to the deal that you want, right? The terms of the deal, rather than just as close as you could get it in English. And then the execution of it will be much closer to what you all discussed in the beginning. It does, I think, from a lawyer perspective, require a mental shift a little bit. He mentioned the discipline it takes to write in Lexon. It requires you to think a little bit differently about how to represent the deal in the words. But once you do, then you start to think about the deal itself differently, and in ways that is quite helpful probably to your client or the context that you're working in.
Excellent. Daza Greenwood, what have you got for us?
Well, I've been thinking a lot about what people are saying, and the question that keeps coming to my mind is with the powerful programming tool like as Lexon is, and based on what it provides, I'm wondering, beyond contracts and the Article 9 kind of security agreement that I know you've been working on together with Carla, what else would be a particularly good fit? And I'm thinking back to my lawyering days about different types of legal instruments that had a lot of, I don't know, inputs and outputs, or variable terms, or that were interpreted based on, I don't know, floating data like the APR rate or other kinds of factors. And I'm just wondering what else you've given thought to, and wills, trusts, maybe derivatives, mortgages, deeds. What other kinds of legal instruments do you think might be well suited for the types of capabilities provided by what you put together?
So that one, I think I'm going to jump in on. One thing is to not limit it to transactions or deals or contracts, but like think bigger. Think reg tech, think corporate governance tech, think anything that requires reporting of your legal obligations, where you could represent those legal obligations in writing, right? And then fulfill those obligations automatically, right, via smart contract. Think a little bit beyond the term smart contract, right? And the idea of the contract itself. I think the question is what couldn't it, right? I think if we change the way we think about this stuff, we're going to find it's actually quite applicable across the board. That's my prediction. I think there's lots of super fun things we're going to be able to do with it.
I love the excitement. Henning, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I'm also, it's just awesome. Thank you, Carla.
Yeah, thank you.
Daza, I have even more for you. And just between you and me, come closer. So I figured out how you can not only codify contracts, which are private law, basically, but also law on the whole. And that's a really new development. And I was very encouraged by the enthusiasm you, Daza, brought to Lexon and how you were encouraging us. But I think it goes on. We're at this now for quite a while, more than 2 years. And I was always very optimistic about if we manage to not die from feature creep, if we keep the focus small, which I think I did, then we might, by the focus on smart contracts and by just insisting that we're just going this one-way street from smart contracts to making them more legally acceptable, so to say, or readable, by always focusing on this direction and this humble beginning, really, we might find the gate towards higher up. Lexon as it is now, and what it is proposing right now, I thought would never be useful to articulate law, just contracts, right? And Carla, though, took it and ran with it and humbled my understanding of Lexon with, well, just taking a step and coding law on it, which is awesome too. But it works because she has she took a very procedural part of law, and I hope she's going to tell us more about it. I do think, meanwhile, the gate becomes clear where from Lexon we can go even a step higher, where it cannot be Lexon like it is right now, because Lexon right is really a programming language. It's really close. It reads like not natural English. Well, maybe I should make a screen share and show how it looks. But it is a program. And law, the statutes on the book are something different. And yeah, so I think it might even go further than what we see right now. Otherwise, I would second Carla's claim, where it's like, it's almost like, what is it not good for? Because it has turned out that, not really intending to go there, but it has turned out that it works off-chain, as we just heard in the example of Adam's great question about royalties, for example, where maybe trust is not the problem. Maybe the computing is the problem, right? And it also works outside of the legal, where maybe it's really just about business, and the royalty part is also interesting for that, because maybe it's not really a legal problem. Maybe it's more about business agreements and how you can automate the consequence of business agreements. So that's a view where it's not really necessarily the legally enforceability of the contract, right? So all the examples you have just listed, and there's more. I should actually grab a list here. But it's really surprisingly many different kinds of contracts that this touches. So this makes sense.
Well, just to put a pin in that, in the last computational law course at MIT that we did in January, we had quite a few people, Thomson Reuters and other places, helping us map out, just as a thought experiment, a couple of different jurisdictions' tax law, or elements of the tax law, some VAT tax and other things that were very programmatic, you know, and had formulas literally. And that, you know, that's one thing that comes to mind. And, you know, air traffic control, maybe weights and measures, NIST stuff, algorithmic zoning, maybe, you know, as long as you have data that you're deriving from. I suppose there is a lot on the limit. I mean, the first thing that came to my mind would be like the 14th Amendment, like due process, or like there's some things that are so conceptual at a high level. I'm not sure how the syntax and capabilities would directly connect. So doubtless there's some limits, but I guess the big news here is what's in the scope. And it seems like it's a big old swath of the law. So exciting times to come.
Yeah, I'd say probably, if I said what's it not good for, common law, right? We're not going to code common law like anytime soon in general. So particularly constitutional law. Yeah, that's probably very, very accurate. Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. And I want to thank, we've got Diego Alcala, Chase Ertl, Colin Levy, all watching in the Facebook group. And thank you to Brendan Maher and Adam Kirpelman here in the Zoom room. And Brendan has a bunch of questions here. He has come out swinging. So let's get to one of his questions. How are you approaching automated and autonomous contracts and things that fall through the cracks? Or are you doing that at this point? Henning?
Can you repeat the question? I'm not sure I understood.
Yes. He says, how are you approaching automated and autonomous contracts and other things that may fall through the cracks? Is that something?
Nick, I'm sorry. I think he's getting at when you're working with automated and autonomous contracts, things are going to fall through the cracks. And how are you, this gets to the flexibility question. And Henning, you talked a little bit about this in the paper. As well. I think I've got that right. Brendan, maybe you can tell me if I'm...
Yeah, if you clarify for us in the chat, Brendan, if we missed that, but Henning, go ahead. Thank you, Adam.
So, I mean, if I hear autonomous or anonymous smart contracts or contracts in the first place, that is the blockchain domain, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there is per se not really anything that Lexon changes there. It makes it readable.
Okay.
That puts in sharp relief sometimes how smart contracts are different from contracts too, right? So it makes it easier to talk about it, and it pulls people, lawyers, any business people into the loop so that they can verify the smart contracts. It does not change the nature of smart contracts itself, and because as I said, that used to be our anchor, starting from smart contracts and making them readable, right? That's been our direction. So we're not really changing the nature of smart contracts or reducing their power or requiring anything of them that they would not normally have.
Okay. And he has a follow-up question that I have some interest in. I should say that Henning and Carla did a walkthrough for me of this, and maybe we can do that in a minute. Can we do that in like under 5 minutes, Henning, so that people who are watching can see exactly what it is? Because Brendan comes with another question that obviously plays into, at least in my legal mind, plays into the, to what extent can you modify clauses, existing clauses? Can that be done?
So if you're talking about modifying them when they're on chain
Mm-hmm.
already, when they're deployed already, that's something that has been part of the concept of Lexon from the start. It's in the white paper from the start that this kind of is a twin challenge to readability, where we have to face that in the court system, like
Mm-hmm.
in the legal system, judges can change history, right?
Right.
You can throw out a contract and just say, well, I think that never happened, actually. Let's wind this all back. And for smart contracts and for the blockchain to be as useful as possible for business and as close as possible to real contracts, there has to be a solution for that too. That is not a question of readability of the language immediately. I mean, that certainly helps, but it's a different part of it. It's why we're working on our own virtual machine, working on our own blockchain in that sense, where we will be able to rewind individual smart contracts. There has to be very strong rules. I mean, in a sense, they're inspired by the debacle of the DAO back then, and how that was wound back, but also how credit cards work, where you just don't get your money for 30 days, right, as a merchant, until all the fraud has been cleared out. And there's a reason why that window seems acceptable in real business, right? Usually with blockchain, we're talking about minutes or seconds of block times and for the money to be there as fast as possible. But we're talking about the other end of the spectrum when we're talking about prevention of fraud or being able to roll back stuff, because that's just an essential part of business, because some things can go wrong that have not been thought of when the code was created. And we want to go and be as workable as possible for the legal system, so that the sync is as good as possible, right? So this is already in the first white paper, but it is not what we were talking about here when we're talking about human readability, right, and the language. It's also something that you want to implement on the level of the virtual machine that we're working on, and where the compiler and the language is one essential part of.
May I just offer on that exact tip? It seems when I'm looking at Lexon and thinking about how it could be deployed especially now I'm thinking more consulting and with clients and in the field, it seems to me like it is good for a lot of things, but it hardly exists in a vacuum. And so especially commercial relationships between parties that have, many transactions, I've got to assume that some of the, risk of loss and other, kind of bumps in the road would the transactions would be structured to ensure things like insurance or bonding, some dispute resolution, a reserve fund, all of the other types of tools that you can bundle around the contract as part of the overall life of the transaction. And I think that's just terribly important. Also, a little thing we like to call amendment, so people are free to amend contracts, and that's another way to say modify.
Yeah, I mean, that's maybe a great segue to the contract, Carla, that you might be that you could show. I mean, I could screen share, the code of it, and you could talk us through it, and that actually has our
Admin
attempts
process.
in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Brendan's got some more questions here, so I think that will help help elucidate here a little bit how this all works.
All right.
Well, while you're sharing, could you just a reminder, is the logic kind of, engine behind this Ergo or Flora 2 or something else?
So the actual implementation of this is just vanilla compiler building. We're using the same tools that are used for creating C++ or C# or Java, what have you, right? So they're basically the same since 40 years or so, and that's completely what we're doing. What we're not doing is using a very high-level language and changing it into a domain-specific language. By the approach that we're taking, we have more freedom. It's the, you go down to the metal really and build it up from scratch. And a couple of things where Lexon has very small but significant divergences from how languages are usually crafted, we can do on that level. And that's why basically it's Lex and Yak, and now in a second iteration we've used Pest, which is another format than BNF that you would usually use to define the grammar. And that's all open source, actually. That's on GitLab. You can take a look at it, how that looks. Where of course, it's work in progress. It's still chaotic, and we're still making it better, but it's out there. So let me screen share.
Yeah, please.
Contract.
So while we're doing that, I'll just lay the base for what this is. So in that paper, Conceptualizing Crypto Law, I make the argument that you can use smart contracts for RegTech. And in particular, I say, as an example, look at the Article 9 filing system. So when secured lenders make a loan, they file a form that is literally, well, if you're lucky, it's literally a PDF fillable form that you type in, you print out, and you often literally take in and hand to the filing office. There are some jurisdictions that do it digitally, but not everyone. And the goal of the system is to put everyone on notice that a loan has been made for a specific category of collateral, debtor's collateral. The problem is that because of the way the system works, no one gets actual notice. Right, so there's a myth of notice, but no one actually gets it. It doesn't work very well. And so we have all these rules that we've built up in the code and through case law, the code being the UCC, in this case, the Uniform Commercial Code, designed to make better scenarios where people didn't actually get notice. So what happens when the filing's wrong? What happens when the filing office took it and it wasn't supposed to take it? What happens if you forgot to file? What happens if you filed but you put the wrong name, etc.? We have all these rules. And the thought was, if we could code the thing, maybe we could actually give people real notice, which is the point. And maybe we could stop making mistakes as well, or make fewer mistakes. And maybe, just maybe, half the class that I teach of secured transactions disappears. And my students are super happy, right? So the original thought was smart contracts and blockchain technology are great for this because at base, blockchain technology is getting a whole bunch of untrusting parties to agree about the evolution and existence of shared facts between them. It's putting people on notice of transactions that have happened all along the way. And that's what this is supposed to do. It just doesn't do it very well. So maybe we could make it work better. Only problem was I can't code in Solidity. So along comes Lexon, and I read the paper, but at that point it wasn't, I've read the paper several times at that point, but it was the paper with the tree, and it wasn't a book yet, it was a slimmer version.
Oh, which is a perfect time to show the book one more time, Henning. Show the book. Can we look at that? It's got the robot and everything. Very nice. Sorry, Carla, right back to it.
That's okay. And I was at a conference where we were focused on Uniform Commercial Code stuff. And I thought, this is a great time while I'm immersed in Uniform Commercial Code to try this out and see what happens. And so I did. And I think it only, my first attempt only took a couple hours. And I didn't get it quite right, I'll be honest. But I think, I got close-ish, right, Henning?
Yeah.
And then we sat down again later and worked on it some more, and this is where we ended. And so what you see in front of you is the Lexon version of that PDF fillable form that you can download from any state filing office right now. The first part, if we scroll back up, is the definitions, just like you would have to fill this exact same information into that PDF fillable form. And then a few extra definitions that make the clauses work later. And then the clauses below are essentially representing smart contracts that make all those rules I teach my students, making them work.
Okay.
So that you can file your financing statement, the UCC1 form, via a smart contract. You can get a reminder that you need to file your new one 6 months before your old one lapses. We've done a couple things. So the priors for this project are A, to try and create something that could be implemented under existing law without changing it. Two, to where possible, offer options that would actually improve the system beyond what existing law does, like offering a reminder fee to the filing office if they actually send you a reminder, which they don't right now, but maybe incentivizing them to do that through fee generation.
Okay.
And generally just trying to make it as simple as possible, which is the goal of the UCC filing system in general. Because if I actually want offices to adopt this, it needs to be as close as possible to what they know. And I've been workshopping it with some filing office folks and some practitioners in the area. And so far, I think we're at a place where it doesn't require change to existing law. You could use this right now if you were an inventive, forward-looking filing office under existing law. But the feedback I hear, and I don't think it's wrong, I think it's true, including for me as I sat down to write this, is that adopting something like this might take a little bit of a mental shift for the office, right? A change in practice. And the thing is, like, that's the point, right? So that part doesn't bother me. But for that reason, it might take a while for adoption. But the goal of being able to do it under existing law, I think we're getting there.
Excellent. Adam, you look like you're deep in thought here. You've got a question coming.
Well, I think this is really, Carla, I used to work at LegalZoom, and we dealt with a lot of filing offices and trying to make that process work kind of more rationally. I think one of the challenges that we run into is who's going to benefit from a new system, and are they going to push hard to make it happen?
So two things. This isn't a new system. It's the same system, just digitized, right? We've built in, if the filing office feels threatened, we've built in like new jobs for them, right? And new fee generation aspects. So if they want to, this actually makes them more relevant than before, which is part of so like in the original paper, I was all naive and rah-rah and said, if we do this, we can get rid of filing offices. I later realized that if that's what happens, this never goes anywhere, right?
Right.
So the goal is to include them as much as possible. But it certainly, the law firms aren't worried about it, right? It's not that they run out of work; they just get different work than the one they have now.
Yeah, can I?
Please.
So thanks so much, Carla. I would like to stress again, what we looked at here, the text that we looked at, the proposal is that this very text could become law, right? The idea is that we could have on the books this exact text. This exact text is also what we can compile and create a smart contract from that runs on the blockchain. It's the same thing, and that's the point, right? So the filing offices could in the future basically perform the law. They could run the law. They can take a book out of the statute, take a page out of the book and put it in the computer and run it. And again, that kind of collapses all the way in between where the lawmakers make a law or a committee makes a law, and then it is implemented in the filing office and maybe different in every state. And by this is just going to be closer to what the original thing, the intention was, and a lot of work is saved. Obviously, that is just duplicate work. And what happens if you look at stuff like this is that you can have, maybe I can stop the screen share, but what happens is that we found that we can have a,
I can stop your share if you need me to.
Yeah.
There. Yeah.
So what happens is that we find we can have, we need something actually for this to work, and that is a registry basically of IDs, a registry of registering the tractor vehicle numbers that are being put up for collateral, or whatever it is that you need to identify what it is that you put up for collateral, so you can put it into this digital contract. And that's actually just an improvement. Like the current system should also have that, but it becomes even more glaringly necessary if you digitize it, because you see that gap more clearly immediately. And that then can, in that case, and that specific case, can be the specific new task that a filing office would play a very important role with to really make the system work, which in the moment suffers greatly from people moving of a state line and then changing their filing office. But so I think that is not by a coincidence. You will always find the work shifts to something different, where the anchor in the real world that anchors the digital world becomes, as an abstract description here, the new task of those who before manually did these tasks.
And the other cool possibility with the system is, so if one of the ongoing debates right now at the Uniform Law Commission is how do we deal with digital assets, particularly under Article 9? Like, how do you perfect in them? Well, what if the perfection mechanism, the filing system, was built out of the same thing as the digital assets, right? That makes it way easier to figure out a natively applicable perfection mechanism than if you're trying to perfect digital assets with paper, like a PDF fillable form that you print out and turn in, right?
Right.
So it's exciting because it opens up new doors with the same system. We didn't change anything. There's no changes required to the law. It's the same law. It's just reimagined. And then that opens up new ways to treat the new, I think really the new classes of assets that people are struggling with right now under the UCC.
Look at Daza smiling. What is it, Daza? What?
Well,
Happy. I also have never seen him so reserved. Like, this is really interesting to me. So go ahead and let loose a little bit here, Daza.
Okay, here you go. So you've invoked the concept of a registry, and in the law, this is one of those nice crossover areas where legal people have a pretty good idea of registries. Registry of deeds. This UCC Article 9 type registry system where you register your claim to collateral and perfect it. And so two things come to mind. One of them is with with technology systems, as opposed to legal systems customarily, they express themselves, they can express themselves through APIs and interfaces, and there's very common capability types, like I'm thinking pub/sub, publish, subscribe, so you can get like notices and alerts when things are happening, or you could even type a query like, who are all the people that have rights to this kind of data, or what are all of the rights to this kind of property, or what are all of the types of property, like show me all the yachts out there that people have rights to.
We built that in. It's in there. It's in the form. We did that. We thought about how can you pull all of the notices that have ever been filed about this particular collateral. Show it to me.
Yep.
It's in there.
And while Henning's pulling that up to show us, I want everybody, listeners later and viewers right now, to know my knowledge on UCC stopped at 2207. So there's a reason that Adam and Daza have been asked to participate here tonight, because I do not recall past studying 2207.
And I have to say, it's an honor to be here. This is my first time as a tryout as a co-host, and pretty giddy about it because we love your show.
Yeah, thank you.
And then that makes me think of other registry type systems that maybe could start to, if you had enough of the filing agencies or the other authorities responsible for them, they were to adopt this type of system, how it might look like almost like a public open infrastructure service that could be helpful for the economy. So, I mean, one that we have that's already a registry is do not call lists, and that's old settled law by now. But you know the do not pay set of applications, I assume, where there's this kind of startup where they're starting to automate legal functions like you owe me $10 every time something happens, or I get a rebate or something like that, or I want to contest a ticket. There's a lot of functions like that out there in society. The robocall prohibitions, include some kind of like liquidated damages per incident. And there's also penalties potentially for infractors of do not call. And we're all being drowned in spam now from people infracting that. I'm just wondering what other types of registry systems that are fundamentally legal could also be maybe expressed computationally in this way so that they could actually be effective and efficient and serve their purpose, not to mention measurable.
Great question. Carla, it looks like you have an answer there.
I don't know about an answer, it's just like brainstorming.
Comments,
right?
yeah.
So I don't know. It's a good question. What else could you use it for? I mean, there's been interest in real estate registries, right? So in registries of deeds, but people haven't been able to pull it off because it's too expensive so far. Maybe it's less expensive if you can express the deeds themselves in words, right? Rather than trying to figure out how to tokenize it or something. I don't know. I imagine, I immediately think I've been working on some AI projects, and I immediately think of some not awesome applications actually in the land of RegTech. But yeah, the point's well taken, and it's definitely something to think about further. Like what other registries could we use it for the same issue, where the same problem is this is supposed to provide notice and it does not, because the way it functions is not the way we meant for it to function. What else is there like Article 9 that I just don't happen, I'm a Article 9 person, right? So what else is there that I don't teach a class in that that functions the same way? So
well, copyright registration, trademark registration. I mean, I have to say, this idea of going through the government registration is very, very interesting, because one of the big challenges, I'm a big believer in smart contracts. One of the big challenges is that you got to get both sides of the transaction to agree to use a smart contract. Now, but you're in a very different position if you can convince a government agency to say, this is how you do business with us. Because they can kind of, they're like the federal court saying, from here on out, you're going to e-file. Well, guess what? Everybody is now e-filers now because they have to be. And that with my product manager hat on, that just strikes me as a really interesting way to get this out into the world. And if the pitch to the government agencies is, look, you can save money, this system can work a lot better, that can be a pretty powerful pitch to them.
It is Willy Wonka's golden ticket for legal tech startups, is if we can get the government or the court to tell people that they have to use us, that's the home run.
Right, you got to find some innovative Secretary of States out there, and adjacent to the Article 9 office, when they're in Secretary of States, of course, is the corporations division. And just to throw it out there, man, if there was a Lexon-enabled incorporation or filing of an LLC, I know we had talked in Chicago when you got me all excited about Lexon when we met, about making the operating agreement of an LLC basically a live operational document through Lexon, just to think one level higher, if the wrapper of the LLC itself, so like you've created the entity through the Secretary of State, now it exists, that might be the right level of abstraction to then think about the functions of that legal entity now that it's created, gloriously digital and expresses itself as data through interfaces. It can have operating rules that were of the same DNA, but then it has a contract and it files an Article 9 statement. So maybe the right wrapper to look at is a legal entity. If you're gonna bother trying to get a government to do something, that could be the one where it has a kind of knock-on effect of organizing a lot of lesser included types of legal interactions.
The one reason I like the UCC as a starter, though, is that generally speaking, it's everything is optional, right? So you can, in most places where they do have digital filings, you can still also file by printing out the form and giving them the paper, right? So the pitch is just try it, right? And if nobody uses it, nobody uses it. But it's the same as everything else you do, except better, right? But it's not. It's the same under the law, and just try it and see what happens, right? Whereas like saying put all your corporations on this is a little bit more of a jump, right? But if we can prove it out in the optional context, then you have a running ball to move to the required context, I think.
Yeah, better. It's faster, cheaper, better. Well, then what about the identity? You sort of brought up identifiers a little bit.
Can I jump in? Sorry, can I jump in on the LLC again? Because I think Carla, obviously Daza has found the same fascination there for something we've also been working on. And on an eternity workshop last year, we had particularly a hackathon working group where we were focusing not necessarily on an LLC first, but on the general question of how can you make the foundational contract of a DAO, like a decentralized autonomous organization, which is this vision about an organization, whatever it is, that exists on the blockchain, that's autonomous, that has a budget, and that might engage in a commercial activity and self-perpetuate itself, right? So this fascinating vision of organizations on the blockchain. And there are very focused and long-running communities that focus on DAO projects. And the question we posed ourselves was basically, how can these contracts that run the DAO actually be the charter of whatever the legal representation of that DAO could be? And that's actually one of the first works that I actually had the pleasure to read from Carla, where Carla, you were making the case that DAOs could be interpreted not as something new, but using existing law on the books. And maybe you want to say more to that in a second. But what we were working on at that point were, for example, uncooperated cooperatives, stuff like this, because there's cooperative law in Europe. That's on the books. It's not used a lot, but it still exists. It has a very interesting peculiarities. And LLCs are, of course, something that you might also end up finding the right vehicle for this kind of, again, doubling of the text written in Lexon as both the contract, the set of contracts that actually run, that make the DAO exist on the blockchain, but also the charter that you put to the registration office to give the DAO a legal personhood, be able to shield their members legally, being able to officially own assets. So I think that's where I am super fascinated about that specific part, LLCs or cooperatives, or Carla, maybe you want to talk to what you had found. That is definitely a very interesting interface between this new blockchain world and its powers and the existing legal world.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is the next project, right? It's something we've started working on, but yeah, it's another cool area, particularly because of that double piece that you said, where it is the contracts that operate on the blockchain, but it's also the contract that operates that people look to in the real world too. Yeah.
And Carla, you're the one who tuned me in at MIT to the Massachusetts Business Trust, which was something I learned 5 sentences about, to pass the bar in Massachusetts, but hadn't thought about since. But in looking at it more since our conversation by way of follow-up, seems maybe a particularly good fit for what Henning said just now, partly because the act of creating it is fundamentally a private act between parties, or just creating a trust. Not so different from creating a contract. It sounds in a different area of law, but there's no initial, like the genesis moment isn't go to the government and say, "Mother, may I please have a corporation or an LLC?" Although a little bit of bad news is looking more deeply in our filings, it turns out Massachusetts business trusts do, once they're creating, they do have to file annually with the Secretary of State, because, you know, you can just imagine what has happened in the past where these things running around with, you know, who knows, you know, bad consequences. But nonetheless, the principle is the same. You could go all the way through the creation of the legal entity and have a legal entity that can open a bank account, sue and be sued, form and enforce contracts, like the whole 9 yards. And it's tantalizing. I got to get more Lexon in my life.
And that's the paper Henning was talking about. It's called "If Rockefeller Were a Coder," where I explore that idea. Basically, the idea is that's what Rockefeller did when he didn't like the corporation statutes for his business purposes. So if DAOs don't like the corporation statutes for their purposes, why not give it a shot, right? Yeah.
Very interesting. This is a great conversation. I thank you guys all. It's been about 45 minutes. I know it's late for many of you, so I want to kind of bring us back and maybe do a little wrap up, because I don't want you guys who are staying up too late to dislike me once this is over. It's okay, and I should say it's fine with me if you dislike Adam or Daza, but I'd prefer that you don't dislike me.
That could happen.
Carla and Henning, thanks so much. What haven't we covered that we should have covered? Any like last minute thoughts that you can tell us, that or even your call to action if you want somebody to come over and test this or anything like that. Last minute thoughts.
Nick, if I can start, I mean, thank you so much for having us.
My pleasure.
This for us is super important, getting the word out. It's also inspiring and encouraging. I actually would hope maybe you can leave this open so I can answer some things in the chat here.
You bet.
Yeah, that is basically the word to get out, is just take part in this, get in touch with us. We'd love you to cooperate with you. This is a very long-term project, but it's also super fun, and we'd love to have you.
Excellent, thank you.
And to that end, we are working on a teaching tool using Lexon, and so if you're interested in joining the group of teachers at universities who are interested in using Lexon in the classroom, reach out, because we're working on that too. I think I've got like 5 or 6 signed up so far, so that's
Very
fun
cool.
too.
Very cool.
And how do people, just I have to ask, like, so if someone wants to take you up on that and they wanted to reach out and get involved, where would they go? What would they do? What's
very good? Look at you, Daza. You've been watching some replays.
So for me personally, you just email me. You can find me right now on the MSU Law website. My email is there. In the summer, though, so in about 4 months or so, I'm moving to Southern Methodist University. And I don't know what my contact info is there yet, but for now, you can reach me via my MSU Law email.
Okay, and can you spell that out for our listeners?
It's my name, Carla, Carla.Reyes, Reyes, at law.msu.edu.
And you also have a Twitter account, and you're pretty responsive on that. So
yeah, I'm responsive on it. I don't know how active I am exactly, but yeah.
But you are responsive. What's your Twitter account?
That's a good question. Something about Prof. Carla Reyes or something like that.
Let me find it for you.
I don't know. It
is Prof_Carla Reyes at Prof_Carla Reyes. Henning, how about you? How can people get in touch?
Yeah, I can give you my phone number or my email address, which is hd, like Henning Diedrich, at Lexon.Tech. There's also a mailing list that we're starting, and I would encourage you to get in touch with me also. I'm super happy to send you a PDF of the book to get feedback from you. That's something we're trying to get to a polished state. It's in draft state right now. And that's also, the book is on Amazon. Obviously, there's also a lot of contact information in that book. Also, list.Lexon.Tech is the list, is the domain of the email mailing list.
Okay.
So reach out and just get in touch.
Okay. And the website, I should say, is Lexon.Tech.
Thank you.
So make sure to get that. Adam, how do folks get in touch with you and request pictures of your glorious hair when you actually let it grow out?
Yeah, so I'm not going to answer that question. They can get me. I am on Twitter at Adam David Long, and I run a somewhat moribund website called lostsnap.com, and I'm trying to make it less moribund. Sorry, I got to use my GRE words. But you can also get me at adam@lostsnap.com, and also I blog at lostsnap.com.
Excellent. Daza, where do people find you? I feel like I should know this because I think I interviewed you once, but where might they find you?
I usually am hanging out with open office hours for the world at civics.com, civics.com. And if you're feeling more academic and research like that day, you can come to law.mit.edu and read all about it and click on the contact buttons and, we'll answer.
Outstanding. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. Brendan, don't disappear when we stop recording because there are questions and it looks like Henning wants to answer some more questions, and nobody is forced to disappear. We just needed to wrap up the recording. Thank you everybody for coming. We'll be back next week with episode 76. Special thanks to Adam Long and Daza Greenwood for joining in to ask some very, very good questions of our guests, Carla and Henning. Thank you once again. Episode 75, and the website is Lexon.Tech. Check them out. Get in touch. Good night, all.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody.